but we here, man, live. Got a dope panel today, man. UFU discussions, man. I'll give brothers a chance to introduce themselves before we get to our esteemed guests. I'm gonna pass the mic to KP. KP, go ahead and introduce yourself, and you can pass it to the next brother.
Yeah, Keenan Pearson, longtime member of the U. My guy Javin made me an admin a couple years ago. But originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, long time basketball head, man, just kind of a junkie. But I had a chance to work in professional sports and communications and advertising, PR, etc. So man, just excited to break down the game and just talk about the evolution of just sports business in general, from sneakers to just how the game is being played today.
No doubt. All right. What's going on, everybody? Gordon Chip Battle, bringing the business and member of the U. We're here today to discuss, certain topics. With we got Scoop Jackson coming in today. We got Brian Cook. So we're just here to bring this basketball word to you guys today.
No doubt.
And
BC.
I'm Brian BC Cook. You know what I'm saying? Founder of Bringing the Business, man, podcast, Facebook group, Instagram group, man, big time sports group. Hey, Scoop, man, you're a dope brother, man. We've been following you for a long time, man. So this is an honor, bro.
Thank you, B. Nah, I appreciate you too, man. And just appreciate you, man. All you done, all the stuff, And like I said, before you be in touch, and look, I've been knowing Gavin for a while. Gavin looking good.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, man. Well, Scoop, for the people that don't know, man, why don't you talk? Some people might know you from Soul Provider, man. The sneakerheads. I think you was one of the originators, man, before this thing got super crazy. I imagine you still collecting the newest book, The Game Is Not a Game. Slam magazine, of course, man, but just dope with the pen, man. So why don't you, give people a brief of who you are, man, and what you've been up to.
You just did it.
Take it a little deeper.
You just did it. No, I'm Scoop Jackson, senior writer at ESPN, and former editor of Slam Magazine, author of Soul Provider and The Game Is Not a Game, future author of the untitled autobiography of George Gervin right now. That's the last project we got working on.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's it. Chicago dude, South Side. Like B said, man, basketball junkie, but unlike everybody else on here, not just the game of basketball, but the culture of basketball. So I've tried to do my part to from a journalistic standpoint to curate that as best as I can.
Indeed. That's dope, man. Well, let's jump into it, Gordon. You probably should start at least, man, paying homage to Pelé, man, so maybe brothers can give their thoughts on this whole Pelé thing. I think we've seen soccer or football, as they call it around the world, really take off, man, from young people playing and all that. But what do you think? What do you guys think Pelé's impact is? Does he still have an impact? Is he really looked at as the GOAT? I know Messi and all these other names are thrown out. It seems like Pelé, man, name doesn't come up as much as it did 20 years ago before the game really took off. What's y'all thoughts and what do you see?
Well, that's because we're talking about GOATs instead of gods. I mean, these two different things.
Yeah.
Pelé is he's the origin. He's the originator of making, even though the sport was global, he's the one who took, football, soccer, and made it a global commodity. And while he at the time was the best, there have been other players that come along and other athletes that come along that played the game that probably surpassed him in skill, in stats, in titles, and all this, that, and the other. But there's he gets overlooked at times because the conversation is always about GOATs. It's not about gods. And Pelé's the god. And those who play the game know that. I was just talking to my son, Javin. I was just talking to Rakim. And we said one of the blessings that did happen with this is the timing of his passing, because at least it happened during the time and in the space where there happened to be a World Cup. And which makes it so unique is that this is the first time, I think maybe one more time, that they happen to have the World Cup at this time of year. Usually it's in July and August. This is the first time they pushed it, because of where they had it at. Qatar is one of those places where you can't have it during the summertime because of the weather. So once it got awarded the World Cup, they happened to have it in December, which is something that doesn't happen. So at least during this time period, he was a part of the World Cup conversation. So that when he did pass, there was some global relevancy to him at the time of his passing, where he was naturally in our conversations over the last month. If they had this World Cup when they usually do, we would not have been talking about Pelé, and the impact may have been different because it would have been almost like an afterthought conversation as opposed to a conversation that's continuing. So if there's any golden, silver lining through this, is that the World Cup was shifting and he did pass away during this particular World Cup, and he was on our minds and a part of the ongoing conversation, as opposed to being lost and nobody talking about him and only talking about him in this context.
Yeah. No, that's real. Because I remember as a shorty coming up, I don't know anybody else. I remember it was Pelé and Muhammad Ali were kind of spoken about like side by side when you talked about sporting global icons. But real talk, I probably hadn't really thought of Pelé. I mean, I know we maybe drop something to you every now and then, but I hadn't really thought about him. Was he still living in Brazil?
From what I understand, yes.
Okay. Yeah, but it was Muhammad Ali and Pelé. I don't know if anybody else has memories, but I thought we at least needed to touch that before we really get into it.
But at the time, you got to understand, Muhammad Ali was the most popular athlete in the world. The world had never seen. See, we can't let somebody else tell us the narrative and let that narrative be the fact in which we continue conversation on. If you leave the narrative here in America, they would tell you that Babe Ruth was a global icon. Babe Ruth was not a global icon. Babe Ruth was an American icon. Pelé, for the most part, was, you can go back to Jack Johnson, maybe. You can say that Joe Louis was a global icon, but Pelé was probably one of the first global icons we've had in sports, where he touched every continent and every country, because he was the one that was playing a sport that was played all over the world, right? With the exception of here. Now, Ali, for sake of argument, is the modern day first global icon we ever had. He was the most popular athlete ever in the world, ever, until Michael Jordan came along. Until then, Ali held that down. So what Jav is saying, he's putting it in perspective of how large Pelé was. And I'm not speaking to those who don't know. If they don't know, do your research. We're not gonna minimize our conversation for something you have failed to find out about. Do your research and you understand. Right. But Pelé was on that Ali level, and for those of us that happened to see him or live in that sphere when he was still playing, even before he came over here in 1975 to play for the Cosmos, at the end of his career, because Pelé did what we see basketball players do now. They play ball in America, then at the end of their career they go overseas and do their thing. Pelé did the exact reverse. He played in Brazil, played in the leagues over there, did his thing, and then at the end, when he was going through money problems, America was trying to build soccer up here in the States, and getting him over here was a big deal. And I think he was making maybe $1 million a year. But understand, even before he came over here, he was a global icon. But once he got to America and showed us what the beautiful game looked like at that elite level, his popularity even grew. And that's where he became in that global conversation here with Ali, because Ali's an American athlete. So even though white folks tried to deny him of his globalization, we held him in high esteem. Yeah. And Pelé came over here in 75 and 76 or 78 and brought his global iconicness over here and elevated it to an Ali level. So
yeah.
My quick question. Why you think he hit financial troubles, right? Because if he was the best, again, he probably the best. People saying Messi and all those other players. The only reason I feel like Pele not gonna get the recognition is because of social media and just how his time has passed, and the younger generation don't know about him. Mm-hmm. But why would a player his statue? But again, Muhammad, a lot of athletes went through financial trouble, but just it's just be like, dang, what's the learning lesson from it?
Well, I know with Pele specifically, there were two things. One, there's two sides of the story. One is the corruption of the game of soccer, the same way Ali goes broke because of the corruption in boxing and Don King. So that's one side. I don't have empirical fact to find out what was going on, and soccer organizations and the global game of soccer has a good job of making sure we don't find that out the same way most professional sports do. Mm-hmm. We'll never find out the involvement that teams play, in the roles of financial security when it comes to athletes. I mean, hell, let's take Michael Jordan's external income out of the picture. Mm-hmm. And how financially stable you think Michael Jordan would have been had it not been for all the external money he was making? Here's a guy who was, at before he signed that last year, that last contract with the Bulls, was the 40th highest paid player in the game.
Yep.
40th highest paid player in the game. So if he was, and I'm not saying the NBA and basketball is corrupt in the way I'm saying that, I think Pele went through some corruption as far as soccer was concerned, throughout his career. But to me, Michael Jordan being paid what he paid, what the Bulls paid him, and the NBA never chipped in to make him like a percentage, like the gate that he was bringing into the total NBA. Like, look, Mike, we're going to go beyond what the Bulls are paying you because they're bullshitting you. But we're going to give you like 0.5% of the entire league gate for what you're doing to us.
Yeah.
But
so to me, that's all corrupt.
Was that plausible?
You know what? Here's the thing. We act like rules are written by somebody outside of man.
Right.
Yes.
Rules can be written and rewritten anytime they want to, man. Come on.
I'm glad.
There's no Moses walking around with the 10 Commandments like when it comes to rules in sports.
Real talk.
It doesn't get like that. So yeah, they could have done whatever they wanted to. And if you want to argue that, find a way to argue that somebody else is doing what Michael Jordan is doing for the league.
Nobody has, and I won't agree. I won't say no to that. Right, you're absolutely correct.
Right, the other part of it is, from what I understand, is bad investments that Pele was making. He was making bad investments, and it came back to haunt. Now I don't know if that was the people he was making investments through, like if it was agent attorneys who was lending money to do that. But I also know that he was, consistently making bad investments with the money that he was making, and that led to him having financial troubles.
I know at one point he was the highest paid soccer player.
What was the salary?
Let me see.
Was that over in Brazil or was that here once he got to the Cosmos in New York?
From what I read, it just states during his playing career, he spent years as the best paid player. So
well, let's look at this then. I mean, I don't want to get all into this, but let's look at this. Now we have to look into the economy over in Brazil and see what they could afford to pay him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because soccer back then wasn't at the club level that it is now, where you had the Premier League, where you had the Champions League, and all of Europe getting involved and having club leagues and having players like a Messi or Mbappe or, whoever, Cristiano Ronaldo going around to other clubs, transferring clubs like that. Soccer at that time was somewhat regional. You played, not only did you play for your national team, but you usually played in the, continent or in the nation or in the space in which, you were assigned to. You played inside of Brazil. Pele didn't go to, France. He didn't go to Italy. He didn't go to Germany. He didn't go to Morocco. He didn't go to these other places to play soccer. So, and none of them did the same thing. So the game has changed.
Yeah, I got a question.
Look what I found out. Excuse me.
Yeah, you good.
Look what I found out. In 1975, I found an article in 1975 where he was brought here. It's from the New York Times, and he was going to play with the New York Cosmos for $7 million on a 3-year contract.
Okay,
that ain't bad for back then.
Okay, yeah, I thought he was making $1 million a year with the Cosmos.
$7 million. This is in 1975. $7 million for a 3-year contract. But look at this. Look at this. It is estimated that 2 million of that amount will be to pay the taxes for to the Brazilian government.
Right.
So 2 million of that got to go to taxes.
So now we back to him making $1 million a year.
and the corruption.
Right. So I don't know what type of debt he was in Brazil, but I know he was going through some financial stuff. And from what I understand, it's part of corruption, but it's also bad investment. So, but I don't know if he was the one making the investment. I don't know who he's working with. I can't, I was too young to remember who his team was, and I wasn't at that age. I was 11? Yeah, I was 11, 12. I wasn't into the financial part of sports at that time.
Yeah, going back to Javin's original question about Pele versus Ali and just kind of pairing them together. Obviously, if Pele was American, he'd be way more well known than he is now in the States.
In the States, no doubt about it.
But I'm wondering whether you know, because I don't know this and never really thought about it, but just from observing, I don't see the diaspora recognizing Pele as much as you would see an Ali or some of these other icons. But America would have to share that story a little bit. The media here would have to share that somewhat. Do you have any insight into how the diaspora embraced him while he was playing?
But they embraced him kind of similarly to how we did because of the way the game was played back then, and he got that respect of being that god back then. But America, as you know, is the marketing capital of the world. Period. And from that standpoint, a lot of times you have athletes that are not from America. They follow the lead of America when it comes to their popularity.
Sure.
So, I can make a current analogy, but let's go back to Pele's day. I know in South America he was a huge deal, and I know in other parts when it came to soccer that he was looked at, as the god. Mm-hmm. He had some incredible stuff happen the same way we talk about Maradona in Argentina and what he meant to the game of soccer. But dealing with the diaspora, I for people in the Caribbeans to people I know from different countries in Africa, mm-hmm. He's still looked at as that.
Yeah.
But he wasn't marketed
right
as that. And a lot of that I think has to come with America's rule as the central piece of marketing, especially when it comes to sports.
And also being a little self-centered about promoting their own.
Well, they promote their own, and they have, especially back in the day, the one thing they never want to promote, it goes back to the Babe Ruth situation, is somebody that doesn't look like the ones who were controlling that story.
That too.
So if you're a person of color, they don't want you to be Captain America, mm-hmm. and telling that story to the rest of the world.
And the last thing I'll say about it, which is also interesting, is that we know it's so much racism with worldwide football, soccer. And so, I guess as the game grew, I don't know if that was always, straight up a part of it or something like that. But clearly they wouldn't want a brown skin, a dark skinned brother like that to be the face of the game. So it almost seemed like he got kind of etched out, because real talk, we knew about Pele.
Yeah.
Whether it was Black History Month, anytime we knew about Pele, like a Ali, even when Jordan came on the scene, those were kind of the three deities or whatever. And then I never had any interest in playing soccer. I didn't know anybody who really played back then. So, it was just that kind of thing. Cool. You know what I'm saying? It happened in Brazil. He came over here. Right. And I imagine that's what really helped the game also expand here. If you think about from the 80s on up to where it is, how kids play today. But that must have been a part, because how could the GOAT, the god of it, be a dark-skinned brother like that, and all this banana monkey racism in these football arenas around the world? That's what's crazy. It's boxing.
But it's amazing that he had to fight through that and still, do you know how good you have to be, how great you have to be to fight through that and still be considered a GOAT?
Absolutely.
And all this held up against you. It's very similar to what Roberto Clemente had to go through. Mm-hmm. We talk about the game of baseball, and that's sacred here in this country. For us to even talk about Roberto Clemente, who's very similar as far as the storytelling when it comes to, being considered the GOAT or the god or something like that. to fight through that and have like America acknowledge that somebody that's non-American, somebody of color, is really, you know, the greatest player that, you know, they've ever seen at that time.
Yeah.
For us to even talk about Roberto Clemente, do you know how good he had to be to fight through that?
Right. Real talk. That's a good point.
Yeah,
That's
that's
So
real.
Pelé just had to do that on a, you know,
Yeah.
on an international level. But I do give America credit in that when he did come over here, he captivated America, because America, even at the end of the day, when it doesn't honor you like that, especially through the media, the people do.
Mm-hmm.
He captivated us to be like, no, that dude's he's that dude.
Yeah.
He's showing up he's showing us what this game is supposed to look like at its highest level.
Real rap. Real
The
rap.
same way, you know, Roberto Clemente and Willie Mays and Hank Aaron, you know, were doing early on at the time. You know, the same way Muhammad Ali was doing, the same way Sugar Ray Robinson and, you know, Joe Louis were doing. You know, the same way that they had to acknowledge someone like Julius Erving. You know, and acknowledge the whole league of the ABA when they were trying to sell us on everybody but that. The same way, you know, it's like, oh, George Mikan is the king of basketball. When Wilt Chamberlain comes along, that changes that. You know, and the media really doesn't do that. I think that's the people who recognize that, and we force the media and the marketing system we have here in America to tell as close to truth to that story as possible. And I think that's what wound up happening with Pelé.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, appreciate you touching that, man. Let's jump it off, Gordon. What you got for us, man, to really kick this thing off?
Okay, I want to take a hit, Scoop. All of us are basketball fans. All of us are huge fans of the game. I've been doing a lot of research on the rule changes of basketball. I've been searching up certain numbers and statistics and metrics and analytics. What do you feel about how much the rule changes have affected to where you got players like Luka putting up 60, 20, and 10, stuff that's never been done before? And my take on it, you know, the guys aren't playing defense anymore. It's a bad product what I'm seeing out here on the court, right? And so it doesn't take away from Luka's greatness, right? Yeah. But I feel like the numbers are inflated. The stats are inflated now as compared to 10 years ago, 5 years ago, right? And it's due to the fact that the players, I believe it's because when you pull up the NBA salaries, the average player is making $10 million now, compared to Jordan being the fourth highest player back in 92, 93, where he was only making $4 million. You got a Russell Westbrook contract where he's making $47, $48 million. These are some of the reasons why we're seeing what we're seeing, to where every night it's a new player, role players. You had Jeremy Grant put up 45 the other night. You see what I'm saying? Like, so it's to the point where, you know, these type of performances, they used to be a where were you moment. Like, I know where I was when Kerry Wood struck out 20 people. I know where I was when Jordan hit the shot on Elo. I know where I was when Scotty dunked on Ewing. 20 years from now, if you ask me where I was at when Luka put up the 60, 20, 10, I was at home. I didn't watch the game.
Okay. Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I totally agree with you, but I look at it from a different angle.
Let me hear it.
I always look at the alternative to, okay, if I'm not happy with this, it can always go back to the way it used to be. And that includes more than what goes on the court.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at players, like you say, making, you know, base salary or minimum salary could be $10 million a year. I remember when teams were making that type of money and players were making far less a percentage of what the team was generating that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy that players are getting $10 million, average, because that's closer to a higher percentage from what teams are bringing in as total revenue. Now,
I am too.
Right. So would I rather have the game play the way it was used to be played, or have players still going through a situation where they're financially being taken advantage of in ways that wouldn't be far-fetched for us to use the word slavery.
Right.
So, in order to get something, you're gonna have to give something.
But it's a bad product to me now. What they're selling us.
But to your point, okay, it's not a great product, but in order to get it back to where you want it, what are you willing to lose to make that happen? Are you saying you want a utopia where you're going to get both? And I don't know where we're going to get both. It's almost like people complaining about, like, say, a Kevin Durant and him going to, when he went to Golden State, like, you're building super teams now. And my thing is, okay, I get that. You may not like that because it's messing with the purity of the game. But would you rather go back to a day when the players didn't have any control of where they went, and you just had a bunch of white owners picking and choosing where they wanted niggas to go?
Right.
Seriously, which would you rather have? So I'm not saying I disagree with you. I agree with you, but I always look at it as, it got here for a reason. And what am I willing to sacrifice mentally?
Right.
To not deal with this. And I'm like, I love the game of basketball, and where you could say the product is bad, I could say the product is whatever the product is going to be. I mean, the game is going to shape itself, and sometimes it's ugly, sometimes it's pretty. There are people who didn't like the Detroit, Chicago, Miami, and that hand check in the 90s. There's people that didn't like that. I love that. You know what I'm saying? I love that level of competition. Some people hated the Allen Iverson style of play. I love that too. Some people don't like the game is going to change, but I'm not willing to sacrifice the freedoms that have come throughout the evolution of the game to get the product back to a place where I'm cool with it. Because to me, you can't have that. That's your cake and eating it too. And I don't see that happening in any walks of sport, especially basketball, where at least from a financial standpoint, the revenue share is 57% in favor of the players.
Mm-hmm.
And there, and we always talk about equity and equality and balance and all this, that, and the other. Well, if it takes the product of the sport to take a hit or two in order for there to be financial equity and movement and freedom of movement, or you have some say in your movement around this, I'll take it.
That's a good way to look at it. That's a really good way to look at it. I know we want to talk about it later, but I feel like that part of it is also, I think it's the way society wants to see the game, for whatever reason, or the way they've chosen to market it. But it's absolutely made the game accessible to Europeans to be able to be in the league. I think there were only a few, if we probably looked at numbers and percentages and all that kind of stuff, they've certainly wanted to make it a more global game. Does that come at the expense of pushing us out of the game? Because we can look at the same. We can use baseball. We can use baseball.
You can't push us out of basketball, though.
No,
we're 97%.
Brian, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I said it's at the expense of them trying to get us. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's all I'm saying. I'm talking about the attempt.
I never looked at it like that. I never looked at it.
So where you gonna see it at is, and it was one of the later topics we want to talk about, basketball becoming an elite sport. What you gonna see is that the kids that really needed the scholarship to go to college and play can no longer play the game on the lower level because they can't afford to play, because the game is being taught in this kind of Euro way. You got to teach kids to play this game. They got to be highly skilled. It's a different type of basketball game than it was. You take a kid to the park and let them run up and down.
Your entry point now is different. Your entry point to the game now comes at a cost.
Yeah.
Where it didn't before. Your talent used to be allowed to get in there without cost. But now, as with anything else, I don't want to just single out basketball. Basketball and soccer were the two sports that have always been economically feasible for a class of people who did not have money to enter in and participate. It's always been that way. But both of those sports are changing. They're changing hands. So let's not act like basketball is the only one that has now rendered an entry fee to get in to play the game. But now it's a less of an entry fee, everything else, because now the only thing you can do free now, damn near make film.
Well, but see, it's not even about it costing. I'm not even talking about costing. You can't even learn the game now by playing pickup. We know a lot of what's happened, in a lot of these inner cities, which you even be able to play pickup. But even if you went and hooped every day playing pickup, unless you hooping with some cats that came from this era to really understand, this is the step, this is the movement, you won't be good. Like you remember, think about a perfect example. Remember guys who couldn't make the team the first shot because they had never played organized basketball, was super athletic. By the next time they come around, they get it. Even if it was just going to the Y, getting in the league. Now they get it, they flourish. You can pick up the game at 13 and be good. Those days are over. You cannot teach yourself how to do this stuff and really be competitive. And so that's what I'm talking about, the price of entry. And so we saw that with Europeans. That's how Luka got so good. He's been training and being taught this stuff, became a professional at 14 or something like that. So, and all I said to say, always youth development is in my mind. Sports has always been a protective factor in our environments. So now when you get kids like, man, the price of entry of being a rapper is easier for me to take my shot to be a rapper than it was to be a hooper, even if I only wanted to hoop on a high school level.
Let me ask you guys a question. Now, how important do you think it is that it is some type of filter when it comes to that, whether it's an age limit, whether it's how hard it is to make it now? Because think about this, when they opened up the gates and started letting the high school kids back in after the Garnetts and Kobe's and all that, we have to admit it was a lot of guys that wasn't ready. And they came to the league, and a lot of teams felt like they wasted their picks on some of these guys because they were 7 feet tall or because they were athletic high school kids or whatever like that. So how important do y'all think it is to have some type of filter to keep the guys that's not ready or just not that good anyway out?
I put the onus on the teams more so than the culture having to address whether people are good or not. You need to really assess the talent.
Yeah, your scouting.
When it's not there, you made a mistake. It's not that the culture is wrong and we've done something. You didn't do your due diligence. And I think at that level, you rarely see people looking in the mirror in those instances. But I remember like the Travis Outlaws and cats like that who had all kind of athleticism, but just didn't have whatever they needed. And it might be mental, but go ahead, Scoop. You wanted to jump in.
I was about to say there's two things that I agree with you 200%. One, I've always had a problem with there not being a consequence to pay from not just the team, but from ownership standpoint. That's connected to the team for putting these kids in position to affect their careers because they weren't ready, but they still got selected.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So all you waste, and I'm not trying to minimize this, but all you really waste is a draft pick. The onus is being put on the kid. No, it's not. Not to me. Not when you can get multiples in a single season and you get one every year. The kids we're talking about, you get drafted and you're not ready. Their whole careers are shit on. They're done.
Right. Their life might be done with.
A team can recover from a bad draft choice a lot faster than a player can.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot faster than a player can, especially a player that is 17 years old.
I'll say this too about that.
Brian. I got to think about that.
I think.
Okay, wait. I want you to think about that. Maybe a bad draft choice a team made and didn't recover from it, and we can throw you a player.
Right.
We can throw you a Travis Outlaw. We can throw you a Leon Smith. We can throw you. We can throw so many players that we can throw you a Kwame Brown.
Right.
And he's straight. So like financially, Kwame's straight.
He ain't talking about financial, but he did not have the basketball career he should have had.
He didn't, but he financially, as long as he did the right things with his money,
But we saying he didn't wreck a team though. He didn't.
That's what I'm saying. The Washington went to Washington fine.
Yeah.
No, they weren't. After they drafted him,
they still bad. They still bad to this day because of them.
There you go.
To do with Kwame Brown.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with Kwame Brown.
It got to do with the people in charge. What y'all saying?
But that's gonna be there regardless if it was Kwame Brown, if it was anybody else.
And
they
you think
still would have messed it up.
So you think Kwame Brown is the reason? You think that one draft choice with Kwame Brown made them make all the other bad draft choices? My thing is that they've had opportunities to recover from that. Players don't. Because if you're a young player and you get drafted at that time and you're not ready for the NBA, you are stuck with that team for 4 years. Very rarely do you see a situation with like Jermaine O'Neal, where he gets drafted by the Portland Trailblazers, and the minute he gets to another team, you find out he
was playing behind Brian Grant and Sabonis. We talked about this the other day, didn't we, Cook? He was playing. Him and Zach Randolph were on that team. They were playing behind some veterans where they
so they helped him get to. But he's a rare situation.
But another thing though, he was really good enough to make the cut though. You know, even though he sat the pine for them first 3-4 years, they still saw some talent in him. Now, somebody like a Kwame and some of the others that never developed, maybe they never were really that good, and maybe they shouldn't have made the NBA.
But here's the thing: they made sure they could have made the NBA. To me, it's about where they're drafted at.
Yes.
Where they're drafted at. There's no player that walked up to any NBA owner and put a gun to his head and said, "You got to draft me." The choice is on them. Now, the problem we need to examine is the fact that the NBA, unlike a lot of other sports, because they get exaggerated with this, they draft on potential. It's that white man's rush to get the first talented black man to do something for them.
Yes.
And that's why I say their career. So when they do that, they draft. There's a 50-50 chance that you're going to draft somebody who's not ready, who's not prepared. They don't have the infrastructure set up because you're dealing with a grown man's game to prepare that person once they get there. You're just thrown into the wolves. Like, you got to play at this level. There's no player development for cats who don't have this experience once you get to the NBA. Everything's right here. Everybody gets treated the same way. So you're going to lose some players like that. And what I'm saying is that these high school players, after 4 years of dealing with one team, a lot of times they don't recover because they're still fighting from behind that 8 ball. And teams aren't affected by that because if you don't work out, we can find you another one. What did Ice Cube say? There'll be a new nigga next year.
Yes.
That's what they do. They go back and find them a new one.
One thing they do, though.
Huh?
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, my problem is that there's no consequence for teams doing that. I've always had this theory that I wish they'd apply, that we're not going to make it a certain age limit for you to come in. But what we will do is if you are under 20 years old and a team wants to draft you, especially in the first round, then that team has to pay a price to draft you.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like what you have to pay to go over the luxury tax. Here's what we pay. Here's your base. Here's your operational base in which you have to function with every year annually as a team. Now, if you go over that, what do you have to do? We're not saying you can't go over. We're not saying, like, people act like the salary cap is a mandate. It's not. Right. You just have to pay to go over it.
Mm-hmm. Is it smart? Is it smart to pay that luxury tax?
Some teams it is, some teams it isn't.
The Bulls never.
How you make it work? It worked out for the Golden State Warriors,
right.
But it ain't worked out for the Portland Trailblazers and the Knicks.
Yeah,
it's all about the team. But here's my thing: is that at least there is a consequence.
Yeah.
With drafting these players, there's no consequence.
Is Portland set up? Is Portland set up to win going forward? When you're looking at the landscape and where they are right now, do you feel like they set up paying that luxury tax? I think
it works for Portland because they're the only game in town. Like they have to do it in order to stay relevant in that town. And as long as the people are interested in the Portland Trailblazers, they're good. They don't have to fight against anything. So they're like, yeah, we can afford to spend this because the organization is not losing money by doing this.
Right.
They're the only game in town. There's no college football fighting against them. There's no Major League Baseball fighting against them. There's no professional football fighting against them. There's no hockey team fighting against them. They're like Utah. They're the only game in town. So when you have that type of revenue stream inside your own state, damn near an entire state outside the University of Oregon,
Right.
hell yeah, you pay the luxury tax.
Okay, I never thought about it like that.
It's not about winning with them. It's about just staying relevant. And as long as we stay relevant,
yes,
and people tune into the Portland Trailblazers in this state, we're good.
That's good info.
My
That's
point
real
is
good
simply this, fellas. My point is simply this. We're talking about the responsibility of that placed on teams in drafting these young players.
yes.
All I'm saying is that if you put something in place where instead of saying you can't get in at a certain age, put the onus on the owners to pay for you to get in early, they would not be wasting these same draft picks because now they have something to think about.